The latest tech.
People love iPhone, and it's an important part of our daily lives.
Interviews.
You see far too many products that come on the market that you look at that you say, was a blind person ever even consulted for something like this?
Accessibility.
The most interesting thing over the last couple of years is the emphasis on gaming and accessibility.
This is Double Tap TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I am Stephen Scott.
And I am Marc of Now, Steven. This week we're going to be talking about a pretty cool event that you had the privilege of attending in Vienna, Austria.
Absolutely. And that event is called the Zero Project Conference, and it takes place every year at the UN building in Vienna. And it features hundreds, and actually this year thousands of people coming from all around the world to learn about how we can create a world with zero barriers. That's why the word zero is in there. And trust me, that question came up a lot. Why is it called the Zero Project? And that's what it's all about. It's about creating a world of zero barriers for people with disability. Now, as we led up to the trip, Sean Priest and I had a chance to find out more about the conference itself and have a conversation with the founder and CEO of the Zero Project on our daily Double Tap podcast. His name is Michael Fembeck, and we asked him to explain the conference and how it all came to be.
So roughly around 180 countries in the world have signed the CRPD, the Conventions of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And globally, there's a need to understand what's the best method, the best solution for children with disabilities to go into an inclusive school. What's the best employment model? What's the best self-employment model? What does accessibility mean? How do you bring this all to life? How to create an accessible website? What are the best apps for ABC to make it inclusive, and so on. So, and these solutions exist somewhere in the world. And we, to cut the story short, we found we can play this role with the Zero Project to identify, research, and then share and communicate those innovations globally, and creating a community all around this. So it's not us who does this research and decision making. We found a way to organize a global network, and this crystallizes in several activities, including the Zero Project Report, which is a storytelling basically on some 70 innovations every year, and then especially at the Zero Project Conference, which is now around for 12 years, and it's a global meeting place centered around those innovators in the United Nations building in Vienna.
And of course, Mark, coming off 2 years of no conferences due to the global pandemic, we asked Michael if they learned anything from doing things virtually last year.
So last year we had a kind of limited in-person conference, but what we learned is this was fascinating to include and work with all these new technologies that came up and were there immediately, but it's not the same thing. So inspiration, connecting, sharing spirits, inspiring each other, this only works in this in-person conference. I'm saying this with being fully aware that this also comes at a cost, not only about traveling costs, but we bring people with disabilities from maybe 80 countries to Vienna, and this is, of course, a hassle for them.
You know, Stephen, now fast forward to your time in Vienna, and you met some really amazing people. But did you really have to travel all the way to Austria to finally meet the Canadian government's Chief Accessibility Officer, Stephanie Cadieux?
Oh, it does appear so, yes. It appears we have to travel the wrong way around the world to meet the right person. That was the way it works here at Double Tap. But yes, I did have the opportunity to sit down and have a chat with Stephanie Cadieux and really find out about her role and how it came about.
So my role is Chief Accessibility Officer for the Government of Canada. The role came into effect as a result of the Accessible Canada legislation in 2019. The role is outlined in the Act along with the Accessibility Commissioner and Accessibility Standards Canada, so 3 different entities. The roles are all distinct, right? The Standards Agency, or Accessibility Standards Canada, is the standards agency. They're going to set up what it is the standard is that people need to achieve. The Accessibility Commissioner is with the Human Rights Commission, and that's for the monitoring and compliance aspects of the Act. My role as Chief Accessibility Officer is as an independent advisor to the minister responsible for the Act. And I'll do a few things in that role, but then the main role is to provide an annual report on the progress towards achieving the goals of the Act. And those goals are very broad. It's an accessible Canada by 2040. So I'm going to be reporting on how are we doing getting there? What are the hurdles? What are the sort of exemplary or standout things we're learning or seeing? So sort of take a very cohesive approach to all of the different entities that are now going to be doing work in this area very proactively to really bring some cohesion to that. That's my role.
Do you get a lot of feedback already from disabled Canadians who are essentially putting a lot on you to say, hey, we want this, we want that, we need this, we need that?
Yes, there is, but that's really important.
That's passion, though, isn't it?
It is, and it's really important. So, I come to this with a very pragmatic approach. I understand from my time in government, from my time in the advocacy world before that, how long and how difficult this work actually is, how much time it actually takes to do this and do it right. We would all like it to have been done 30 years ago, but it wasn't. And as we go forward, we will like it to go faster, and it won't. So I'm really realistic about how we're going to achieve this and in what time frame. That said, the individual experience every day of people with disabilities in Canada, myself included, are not accessible enough. Right? Our daily life is about pushing through barriers, and we want that to stop. The whole goal of the Act is a proactive reduction of those and removal of those barriers so that we don't have to keep advocating for ourselves every day. So I understand the passion and the frustration that comes when people with disabilities reach out and why isn't this fixed, and we need this, and this is a priority. It's important for me to hear that feedback. Hopefully not taken too personally, because it's not my job to fix every problem. It's my job to bring cohesion to the efforts. But in that role, part of my role is to reach out and talk to people with disabilities in Canada and to organizations that support them and say, how is government doing? What isn't working? What is working? What are you seeing? What are you seeing that has changed? What are you seeing that isn't changing fast enough? And for me to be able to bring that information back to the minister in some kind of articulated fashion in a report or even just in our conversations.
So there you go. That is Canada's Chief Accessibility Officer, Stephanie Cadieux, I got the chance to meet at the Zero Project Conference.
Okay, Stephen, that's quite impressive so far, but there is so much more to get to from your trip.
Definitely. And when we come back, we'll be talking with Google's Christopher Patnoe, friend of the show, of course, and another friend of the show from Microsoft, Hector Minto. Stick around. This is Double Tap.
You're watching Double Tap TV. Get involved. Follow us at Double Tap On Air or email us feedback@doubletaponair.com. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
Back on Double Tap TV, taking the virtual trip to the Zero Project Conference in Vienna with Steven. Steven, now, putting accessibility on stage, on this global stage, is a pretty big deal. But I'm curious what other conversations were ongoing at the Zero Project Conference.
Well, this was the interesting thing for me because, of course, we're dealing here with a range of conversations and a range of themes all around disability. And, of course, disability is not one thing, and it's certainly not one thing to one person. It can be a very different experience. For example, Sean Priest and I both are, in quotes, visually impaired, but we have very different experiences of life. Now, extrapolate that into all disabilities, and suddenly you have a lot of different conversations. So what I learned at the Zero Project Conference was that what they were focusing on was themes around education and employment. And this year in particular, we talked a lot about technology. And this was the first year that they really got the chance to delve into technology in a big way. And that was the interesting thing for us, was really just learning how technology was a major part of this. Many people, many of the awardees who go along to the Zero Project Conference will have the opportunity to, talk about their technological achievements. And we learned about some of those this year. But in previous years, they've come along and they haven't had a chance to share with other people their experiences and also share their knowledge, which is really the key to what the Zero Project is all about. As you heard from Michael earlier, it's about bringing people together to talk about their achievements and show what they've done to other people around the world, so they can take the learning and apply it in other parts of the world, in many parts of the world that maybe don't have the same amount of access to technology or services like we do here in the West.
You know, obviously, tech was the biggest reason for us being there, and as well as some other great movers and shakers in the accessibility world. I mean, they were on hand sharing your excitement for being there. Now, one of those people was Hector Minto. He's a lead accessibility evangelist for Microsoft.
Yeah, Hector and I had a great chat about the conference and the upcoming Ability Summit from Microsoft as well. But we started our chat by finding out why Hector feels it was so important to come to events like this, and also to find out how long he'd been going.
Zero Conference, I've been coming for the last 6 years, I think now. Truly global. I think that's the bottom line. It is truly global. In a world of assistive technology that's typically been dominated by what you might call well-funded markets. You know, if you're selling assistive technology in the world today, you're probably starting in the UK, US, Germany, Scandinavia. Has there been a market for assistive technology in the rest of the world? Limited. And so Zero Project's a really great opportunity to think about the democratization of technology, and how, even if it's not about market making for expensive assistive technology, how are we going to tackle disability inclusion in an increasingly digital world in all parts of the world? And to me, you know, they've done an amazing job over the last few years to truly make this global. I don't think there is another event that really brings people from every corner of the world. So I think they've done an amazing job. Martin and the team have just really created that global community.
Now, we went on to talk about how big a role technology has in our lives today versus years ago.
I think I've used this line with you many times before, but you know, when we started, you went to work to use technology. Now people wake up with their technology beside them in bed, and it's having it's starting there. So you know, technology is pervasive in our lives. The responsible delivery of technology globally is really what we've always done in the accessibility space, but I would argue that's much more prevalent now in many other aspects of diversity and inclusion, education level. All of these sorts of things are starting to kind of be thought about in the technical world, because you can't truly digitally transform unless you're bringing everyone with you. It's super difficult for all industries to think about what does it look like in the future. How do we start using these new technologies? How do we start leveraging AI? And what negative impact might it have if we're not truly deliberate about inclusion from the start?
But what about the job that we're doing and promoting accessibility? Is it making an impact like it should?
I was on a session last night with CIOs from an oil company, a brand agency company, and a bank. Okay, now the banks, I think we've spoken to them for an awful long time about accessibility. But why is a brand agency talking about it? What are the oil companies thinking about this? They're doing it. They are genuinely thinking about what future technologies do we build? How is somebody in a wheelchair going to pay for their fuel from their car using this app? You know, those sorts of conversations, we weren't having those. Companies weren't delivering their own assistive technology. This is really analogous with everything else that's happening. And so whenever you hear Microsoft talk to customers or talk about industries, we talk about them building their own ecosystem, their own operating system. It is about the accessibility of Windows, it is about the accessibility of digital platforms, but it's also about the digital infrastructure and their ecosystem to truly make things accessible. I think that's the maturity. The new technologies being applied in the correct way. There's so much work to be done in that space.
And Steven, that really is the story here, making accessibility accessible, as funny as that may sound, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. I mean, all these companies that are coming together are really giving us the chance to learn about the work they do on a global stage. We talk about issues in the US and the UK, in Canada all the time, but issues affecting India, the African continent, these issues are often quite basic issues, and they need simple solutions. And that's what the Zero Project is all about. It's about sharing those solutions and saying, hey, there are simpler ways to do this. And sometimes those ways, it's not about the UK or Canada or the US telling everyone else what to do. It's actually quite the opposite. It's oftentimes learning how we can do things more simply. I always remember a great story during the space race. The Americans came up with a pen that could write upside down in a spaceship, and the Russians used a pencil. So sometimes it's just about being simple, right?
You bring up an excellent point there, and great conversation, of course, coming out of the Zero project. I love that comparison with the pen and the pencil. There's more to come from Steven's trip to Vienna, including Google's own Christopher Patnoe, after a quick break here on Double Tap TV.
Can't get enough Double Tap TV? Subscribe to the podcast and get your fill of Double Tap every day. Visit doubletaponair.com and follow us now. Double Tap TV will be right back. You're watching Double Tap TV.
Now, Steven, Christopher Patnoe is someone in the accessibility community, or the accessibility community knows quite well. He's Google's lead for accessibility and disability inclusion, so it makes sense that he's at an event like the Zero Project Conference in Vienna, right?
Of course. Now, we've had Christopher, like you say, on before, so I took the chance to speak to him and to find out about his highlights about this year so far, so early on, because there's been so much great news out of Google. And he told us all about, first up, their ADC, the Accessible Digital Centre in London, England.
There's two things in particular I'm proud of. We talked a little bit about the Accessibility Discovery Center last time, and if you don't mind my bringing that up, it is getting bigger and better than I ever expected. We had a mobile version of the ADC, we're calling it ADC in a box, that we brought to our hotel in Davos. So in the place where Google was at Davos, we had a set dedicated to accessibility and disability inclusion. We had 3 of our demos and even one of the video games. And it gave people an opportunity to recognize the value of assistive technology and artificial intelligence, AI for good. Empowering someone to take a selfie of themselves without being able to see the camera, having someone be able to communicate without speaking, just using their eyes. It really brings it home in a way that you don't see otherwise. And because of the work we've done in the ADC, we have these demos that we've tried literally hundreds of times, and we know that people respond to them really well. So that's really watching this ADC become something bigger than frankly, I really expected. We've had dozens and dozens of companies come through because they want to understand, why does Google do accessibility? How do you do accessibility? How can we do accessibility better for our products and our employees?
It's funny, Mark, because I have a hard time sometimes keeping up with everything they're doing at Google. So I asked Christopher if he feels the same, working at the company himself.
I think it's one of the benefits of working at a place like Google. It is such a distributed environment. There's no one central organization saying you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do that. We have experts in accessibility and experts in the technology in each of the different areas, and they have the relationship with the community. We don't control that relationship. We may facilitate, but the Brailleback team, the Talkback team, they recognize, because of the people that work on the product who are of the community and the relationships we have with say RNIB and RNID and NFB and the rest. We know it's not working, and it's a matter of making sure we identify the most important things, get them prioritized, release them, and sometimes it doesn't work as well as you want, so you fix it. But that's the nature of developing for accessibility. You're never going to get it right the first time. The goal is always to make it better and better and better.
And of course, we had to find out why Christopher comes to the Zero Project Conference.
This is my second year coming to Zero Project, and what I really love is the power of network, how the network brings to light new opportunities, brings to light new technologies, brings to light new challenges. For example, yesterday I was chairing a panel, sort of a Shark Tank kind of panel, and they had this really cool technology. I was just talking about it in line for coffee. It was called Hello Movie. And what it is, they use an audio fingerprinting technology, and they use it to understand where you are in the context of a movie. So you can download, either on your phone, on say some kind of AR glasses, you can download the captions or download an AD track and be always kept in sync, because it's measuring where you are based off the acoustic fingerprint of the film. So there's no investment in theaters, there's no investment in the studio. They just need to be provided access, and then they can create this sidecar data that you can consume however you want. I've never heard of that before. No, I totally get it, and I think it's really cool.
Now, there's so much more to that conversation, which of course we'll post to our YouTube channel, so you can go and check out the entire interview uncut.
And of course, that is youtube.com/doubletaponair. Okay, Steven, you got a couple more minutes here to give me your final takeaways. Do you think the Zero Project Conference is something we're going to go back to in years to come?
Definitely. I mean, it's a great opportunity to learn a lot about what is going on in the disabled world and also to meet some great people as well. Networking, of course, is what it's all about. For us, though, it's about an opportunity to educate people around the world on what is going on around the world regarding technology. Not all of the projects are coming out of the UK, the US, Canada. As I said earlier, a lot of the answers to today's tech problems for disabled people are coming out of other parts of the world, and it's important we shine a light on that. And that is certainly what we did with our daily coverage on the Double Tap podcast. But I think that there were certainly some particular bits of tech that stood out for me. One particular was an application by a company called Definitely, DEAF, Definitely. And this app uses avatars to create sign language for any audio file that you throw at it. So say, for example, you have a podcast like the Double Tap podcast. You can feed that into the app, and an avatar will read back that podcast to you in sign language. So it will actually present sign language to you. An absolutely incredible piece of kit. In some ways, so simple an idea. I do not imagine it was simple to put together. And you can hear more of that interview on our Double Tap podcast, but just really interesting. It's that kind of technology that I don't know if you would get a chance to hear about elsewhere. The Zero Project allows for that, and more importantly, awards that kind of work.
Well, it sounds like an excellent time was had by all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being there, Steven, on behalf of everybody on the show this week. This has been Double Tap TV.
Thanks for watching Double Tap. Send us your feedback to feedback@doubletaponair.com. Leave us a voicemail at 1-877-803-4567. Hosted by Marc Aflalo in Montreal and Stephen Scott in Glasgow. Producer Marc Aflalo. Editing and graphics Jordan Steves. Voiceover Anna Vicino. Social media Wendy Kaufman. Integrated Described Video Specialist M. Williams. Supervising Producer Michelle Dudas. Manager Programming AMI TV Lizanne Gagne. Director Content Development and Production Karen Nye. VP Content Development and Operations John Melville. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2023 Accessible Media Inc.
An AMI original production.